Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
you gotta be confident about your Achilles when you
Chase
show up.
Thornton,
Yeah, I mean, I got him at
Chris
Hearing
Dowhouse,
about this or pointless in fantasy.
and Adam LaRue. Don't hope to win. Be great and dominate.
Welcome back to another episode of Operation Domination. We are missing our glorious leader, our host, Dan Mater, but we are keeping this thing going. So I will be leading the way today for today's Dynasty Rebuild Trade Target episode. Some buys, some sells, some holds, joined, as always, the other 50% of the show, Chris and Chase. Chris, Chase, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good. Excited to get to our rebuild edition this week.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. I've actually started I'm in the middle of a rookie draft right now, but none of the rookie drafts I've done so far are on any of my rebuild teams. So this will be a good primer for me when I finally get to those drafts and get to thinking about if I might want to trade away somebody or go get somebody, kind of jumpstart that rebuild there. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so if you didn't watch last week's episode, we talked about some trade targets, some buys, some sells, some holds for teams that are actively competing. And at the beginning of that episode, we even talked a little bit about how we're making the determination of, at this point in the offseason, obviously we don't know our wins and losses quite yet. So we're trying to figure out before the season, are these teams contenders, rebuilds, or kind of in that in-between space, which ideally, if you're in that in-between space, we didn't talk about it too much, but ideally, you're trying to get to one of those other spaces. You either want to be a rebuild or a contender. You never want to live in that in-between space. And if you're there, trying to get out of there. So we talked a little bit about how to make that determination last week. We talked about what to do if you're a contender, and now we're talking about rebuilding. So if you're rebuilding, here are some players that you can go ahead and target in your leagues. We're going to start it off with the quarterback position. So our quarterback grouping, our trio that I'm going to make these two pick between, and I'll be picking between them as well, are JJ McCarthy, quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings, entering his second season. Quarterback Michael Penix, same draft class, also entering his second season. And Cam Ward, the first overall pick in the most recent NFL draft. According to Dynasty Daddy, which is a website that has a bunch of Dynasty tools, I definitely recommend it. But they can do aggregate rankings based on, I believe, like 300,000 plus sleeper leagues, especially based on like rookie drafts and startup drafts. Can kind of build out some really solid rankings based on real world leagues. And on their rankings, JJ McCarthy is the QB 17, 64th overall player. This is for Superflex, by the way, if I haven't mentioned that already. Superflex Dynasty, most common way to play Dynasty. Michael Penix, QB 19, so a couple spots behind, and 8 spots behind overall at quarterback 72. And Cam Ward, who is a couple spots ahead of either of them, is the QB 15 and the ranked 53rd overall player. We're going to start it off with JJ McCarthy. We all expect entering his first season as the starter for the Minnesota Vikings. Had his knee injury last season early on, so it was Sam Darnold from the get-go. Sam Darnold balled out, but kind of slowed down a little bit, especially as we got into the playoffs. Really kind of stunk it up a little bit, but he went off. He made a ton of money to go switch over to the Seattle Seahawks, and that opened things up for JJ McCarthy to be the guy in Minnesota. A guy that, I mean, candidly, I think this show was a little bit less confident on than maybe other parts of the media. However, the show also loves Kevin O'Connell, loves Jordan Addison, loves Justin Jefferson, so it makes for a really interesting conversation when we talk about JJ McCarthy. So we'll go into depth a little bit more, but I got to gauge the interest level first. For me, he is someone who is more of a hold. But Chris, we'll start with you. Is he a buy, sell, or hold? And we'll get into the conversations a little bit later.
So we're going to kind of play this a little differently, Adam. I know that you guys will kind of go a little differently. I'm going to kind of stick to the script that we had originally done, that we were sticking to like a buy, sell, or a hold. So this would be the guy that I'm going to sell. This is a tough one. You talked about Kevin O'Connell, a guy that I definitely love, the receiving crew I definitely love, but I also see a Viking team that seems to be transitioning to be more of a run-first offense. You saw them address the offensive line, and one of the big things they addressed it with was girth. They want to be a power running team. They added Jordan Mason in the backfield. This team's going to utilize JJ McCarthy well, but they're necessarily going to, I have Giants and I thought that Joe Burrow, I thought that Sam Darnold. We picked up actually were very exciting and very tantalizing. But JJ McCarthy is not a guy who's super high coming out of the draft on. And of the group, this is the guy that I think that right now I would try to sell. I don't know if the value is going to get better necessarily, but I think a lot of people were tantalized and intrigued by JJ McCarthy, and I would try to find what I could get and can I get some kind of great value for him, and people, especially if they loved him going into last year.
And then Chase, for you, just is he a buy, hold, or sell?
No, I'm going to sell him as well. I'm selling JJ McCarthy. Like Chris said, I was really not high on him coming into the draft last season. I didn't think that, as a Packer fan, seeing him come into the division in Minnesota was about the best case scenario for me. I thought if they were going to take a quarterback, because I didn't think McCarthy was going to be all that effective in the pros. So I'm definitely selling him as well. That's in the case that I had him on my roster. I probably wouldn't have drafted him last year unless he fell to a point where you had to take the value. But yeah, JJ McCarthy, I just don't have a ton of confidence in his skill set. I love the people around him, the weapons he has to throw to, but I agree with Chris there. I think that they are going to want to run the ball more. I think they're going to want to run the ball more because they're going to have to protect JJ McCarthy and kind of hide him, I think, for a while until he gets up to speed. So I'm selling JJ McCarthy right now.
And I'm going to jump in for that real quick, just to build off what Chase was saying. This is a guy coming off a major injury. You don't know what he's going to look like. The physical build was already a knock against him coming into the draft. People were saying he's got to put on some weight. So you have some concerns about that. And this team's a playoff contending, Super Bowl contending team. There's a lot of pressure on this guy to kind of step in and be good, while the other quarterbacks we're going to talk about don't have that similar pressure necessarily.
100%. So long term, look, I with you guys. I think for me, I did end up with him, as I've mentioned on the show before. I'm in like 15 leagues. I did end up with him in one because I desperately needed a quarterback, and he was the last guy that had a clear shot to start that was available. So I do have him in one, and I'm treating him as a hold in that league. That's my answer here. And for me, it's just as simple as I think he can get a little bit higher. Long term, I plan to sell him in that league, but I just think that the Minnesota Vikings are so talented. Eventually, there's going to be a pop-off game. People are going to get excited. Kevin O'Connell, I do really, really trust. He's made some very bad quarterbacks, some quarterbacks who, look, I don't think JJ McCarthy is anything incredible, but I think some quarterbacks who are worse than JJ McCarthy, Kevin O'Connell has made them look good. So I do think that there's maybe a little bit more room for his value to grow, but definitely one that I think we're erring towards the sell side on.
Yeah, well, and if you're selling him too, you're trying to sell people on his weapons, sell them on the Kevin O'Connell offense, and the fact that this is who they wanted, this is who they went and got. So you're trying to sell your opponent, whoever you're trying to dish this guy off on. That's what you're trying to sell them off on. But yeah, if you want to hold him, it's super flex format. You can never have enough quarterbacks. Quarterbacks are currency in super flex dynasty format. But I think, yeah, selling off JJ McCarthy right now, there's, you can sell people on the hype of he's going to be the starter. He's going to have the weapons. He's going to have O'Connell's offense. It's just not for me, though, because I don't have confidence in his abilities, especially coming off of that injury as a first-year starter.
Yeah, I can't argue with that too much. I think he is definitely the guy who I'd be the least interested in. Moving on to a guy who I think we're going to have a little bit higher praises for. It's going to be Michael Penix at QB 19. So he's the cheapest of this group. He's also someone that I know this group was, in general, higher on than consensus. He came in for relief of Kirk Cousins towards the end of last season. Kirk Cousins had the worst season of his career last season. Penix came in. I think most of us would agree that Penix was an improvement over Kirk, although I have seen some arguments to the contrary. He'll get into interception rates and some weirdness. But look, I think we all agree that he operated the offense at a much higher level. I think the additional movement is really important for the offense that they want to run. Can go down the field. I think they've got the weapons to do it. So I'm a believer, and for me, Michael Penix is a buy. Curious what you guys think. We may be buys across the board, in which case we kind of speed on to Cam Ward.
Oh, I'll jump in. I'm absolutely a buy. This is my man crush, Adam. I love Michael Penix. This is a guy I look as basically a left-handed Matthew Stafford back there. And when we saw people with the interception rates, I hope they watched the tape when it bounced off Kyle Pitts' hands to other people. When he bounced off out of the hands of Darnell Mooney to somebody else. 2 of his interceptions were not on Michael Penix. 1 was. So the guy basically had 1 interception over the 3 games. And I think what we saw was a shootout of the game. Everybody was going to sing Bryce Young's praises after he had a little bit of stretch. Michael Penix lit it up that game as well. And what I think you saw was a guy who only had 2 starts, didn't take the reps throughout practice, didn't take all the reps going into the season, and had 2 starts and balled his ass off in that 3rd game. So to me, Michael Penix has nowhere to go up. I'm also not a big believer in the offensive line for Atlanta where they could just establish they can only establish the running game as their identity. I think it's going to be being a pass-first team as well. I think Bijan Robinson isn't going to be necessarily the feature he was in going into last year, where I think they're going to be able to kind of trust Michael Penix and be able to open it up. And what you saw is a guy who's willing to take it down the field, a guy who's aggressive, got Drake London the ball, is going to get somebody you can get Kyle Pitts the ball. You see Darnell Mooney healthy with him throughout the season. I'm extremely excited about Michael Penix. It's absolutely a buy for me.
And what about you, Chase?
Yeah, I had him down as a hold, but I'm gonna say that's a hold to a buy there. And I liked Michael Penix coming out. In fact, Penix was the one I was worried about going to Minnesota as a Packer fan here, because I thought that Michael Penix could hit the ground running there and had a shot to really take them to to where they obviously want to be going with that roster. When you're rebuilding, you're always looking for youth. You're looking for guys that you can get that have some upside to them. Penix is not the youngest guy. We all know that. He was in college for about 23 years. He's 25 years old. He's 3 years older than the other 2 guys that we're going to talk about here. But I liked his skill set enough that I thought that he was one of the more pro-ready quarterbacks. I really did. I think that with the weapons around him, the potential weapons around him, Drake London, and then being able to have, probably the best friend of any of the quarterbacks we talk about today, Bijan Robinson, for a running partner, literally, and as somebody who he can check the ball down to, then if he does get into trouble, we'll see. This is the last year, I think, for Kyle Pitts to kind of prove himself or become what everybody has kind of thought he might become or should become. But he's got weapons there to use, and he got better over those 3 games at the end of last season. Now, they weren't facing a defensive murderer's row necessarily, but he got better as he went on. And when he faced the worst of those 3 teams, in my opinion, the Carolina Panthers, he lit them up. And so, I'm excited for Penix's future. I liked him the best out of the 3 quarterbacks that we're talking about today in terms of his skill set and being pro-ready and what I think he can bring to an offense. So he's definitely a buy for me, a hold to a buy. The only thing that you might worry about is that he is 25 years old. He does have a history of a couple of leg injuries there. That
How's Bo Nix?
Exactly. Like I said, that's why I'm not selling Penix at all. I am holding to buying.
Definitely very fair there. We have one more quarterback in this group to talk about. And that's recent first overall pick Cam Ward, who went to the Tennessee Titans out of Miami by way of, Incarnate Ward and Washington State. Yep. So Incarnate Ward to Washington State to Miami. Little trek through college, becoming all the rage these days. But nonetheless, played really, really good this past season. And has kind of made his way into being the first overall pick for the Tennessee Titans, who are in the 2nd year with their head coach, the father-son duo over there in Tennessee on the offensive side of the ball. Not the most weapons in the world, although we did talk about Calvin Ridley and his potential value last week. But nonetheless, not the most exciting offense of all time, but there's enough that you could potentially get something done. They've made some improvements. So for me, he's someone who's a bit more of a hold, at least relative to this group. Hold to buy. I definitely, he is, for me, below Penix, above McCarthy. But Chase, curious what you have to say on Cam Ward.
Yeah, no, Cam Ward, I've got Cam Ward as a buy, as a hold to a buy. I actually have him. I agree with the ranking here of him being QB 15 ahead of the other two, mostly because, I mean, I just told people not to overplay the youth, but he is young. He's 22. He's 3 years younger than Penix there. And I was impressed with him at the draft, covering him at the draft and sitting in on interviews with him. I thought that he was really well spoken. I think he seems like a mature young man. I think that, this is obviously a guy that they felt comfortable taking number 1 overall. If you feel that comfortable with a guy, obviously, you're going to give him every opportunity that he can to succeed. He's not going to just be a one and done. And we've seen Bryce Young struggle in Carolina as a top pick there, and they show no signs of being ready to give up on him. So you're going to get a couple years out of Cam Ward here. Plus, no, he doesn't have the weapons around him that McCarthy does for sure. He doesn't have even the weapons around him necessarily that Michael Penix has, but I do like what they have tried to do in terms of giving him some reliable guys. They went out and they got Tyler Lockett. They brought Lockett in. Lockett is a guy who can be a possession type receiver for him, and a guy that savvy veteran is going to be open and know he's going to be where you need him to be. Calvin Ridley, we know what Calvin Ridley can offer to an offense. Chigakonkwo is still a usable and dependable tight end. I've never really agreed with how they've used him down there, but I think there's more to be had there. I think he's got some running backs he can throw to. I talked with Penix about Robinson being a good friend there. I think that the duo of running backs that they have in Tennessee is actually, you can throw to either one of them and be comfortable with that. And then they did go out and they drafted Eli Ayamenor, who I liked in the run up to the draft here. I liked him. I like him as that, as a possibility to become the number 2 on that team right now. And they brought in Xavier Restrepo, his guy from college that he liked and that he feels comfortable with. I think they're doing all the right things there for him. I like his skill set. I like what he can bring to the table. I think that he's going to give you a little bit of that mobility, upside there too. And, I like him definitely better than McCarthy. I'm probably not as high on him as a passer as I am on Penix, but the total package I like playing. I'm holding him to buying him.
Very, very fair. Chris, what's your assessment?
Yeah, this is a little bit different for me. I struggle with this one. If I'm going to had to choose, he'd be my hold, but I would be a hold to sell on Cam Ward, where I do struggle with JJ McCarthy having a better surrounding cast, where I do look at the talent of Cam Ward I like, but I also like to think that Cam Ward has a lot of downside. He reminds me a lot of Zach Wilson. I talked about this going into the draft, where there could be a huge boom for him, but we could also see what happened to Will Levis, and he could be somebody that gets on the shit list because he turns the ball over. So I do wonder in between the receiving core. I'm not that excited about Kevin Ridley. I think is a good receiver for him. I wish they would, get a little bit better in the second receiver, like the upside possibility of some of the young guys they drafted. Maybe Tyler Lockett has something left. But I think the offensive line has to be improved. That's going to be the key for him to be able to play. I like the running back game. He should be able to kind of be utilized. The whole part for me is that the QB 15 I think is a little rich for me. I think it's a little high, but I do think there's upside to be had. We've seen his offense produce people like Joe Burrow, like Jared Goff when he has success. We've seen different Matthew Stafford have success. Cam Ward does have legs and he is able to scramble, so they'll see some RPO action that will be something that you can utilize as well. So you see the upside. I just really worry in general. If it goes bad in Tennessee this year, does Callahan get replaced? How stable is his offense in general moving forward? So I kind of worry about Cam Ward. Can he be a turnover machine? Is he going to have a stability around him moving forward? So I have a hold for him, but I could be talked into selling it.
Yeah, it's definitely understandable. So, by the way, Chase, did you have both of them as holds to buys, Penix or was Cam Ward your buy?
Yeah, Ward is my buy. Down my list, it'd be Ward, Penix, McCarthy in terms of the order that I'd be acquiring them.
Perfect. Well, with that out of the way, then we can keep it moving. So last week we did QB, wide receiver, running back. This week we're skipping the running back position and adding the tight end position because in rebuilds, typically we are going to avoid the running back position, or at least avoid having expensive value in the running back position. Keep that to be your finishing piece since they kind of age out the quickest. And you can let some wide receivers, some tight ends, some quarterbacks sit on the shelf a little bit longer while you're getting ready to compete. So we're going to talk through, let me get Cam Ward off the screen here. We're going to talk through our wide receiver group, and that group will be show favorite, my favorite, Romadunze, whose name I now know how to pronounce. Another favorite of mine, and I actually picked two favorites here, Zay Flowers from the Baltimore Ravens, who is the wide receiver 21, 66th overall. Odunze is wide receiver 19th, 60th overall, so really tight there despite being 2 spots apart. And then the very next receiver and very next player overall is Xavier Worthy at wide receiver 22, the 67th overall player. So a very, very tight selection of young wide receivers here. We're going to start from the top with Romadunze and Chicago Bears, who they just extended Joe Thuney, who they traded for earlier in the offseason. This is a team that is very much, I think, improved the offensive line and added significantly to their offensive coaching staff with Ben Johnson. I think done a lot of good things. If you're ever going to be optimistic about the Bears, this is the time to be optimistic about the Bears. Caleb Williams is someone who I think we were all disappointed in his rookie season, but at the same time, if it really take a step back, it's not a bad rookie season either. I think we just held him to a very high expectation because we know what he's capable of.
Yeah, you're watching tape by yourself, Adam. It's hard to figure out what to do.
Exactly. I think we all have some gripes with his offensive coaching this past season, but nonetheless, I think he and Romadunze will benefit from the new staff, benefit from the improvements on the offensive line. There's a lot to potentially like about this Chicago Bears offense. So, Chris, go ahead and start with you. By the way, Romadunze, for me, I'm going to rank him second out of the group, but for me, he would be a buy, but second out of the group. I have another player who I would prefer to buy, but Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, so on that note, Adam, I'm going to kind of do what you did. I'm going to go hold to buy, so he'll be my middle second player, my hold to buy. I love Romadunze. I'm very high on him. I still think he's one of the more talented receivers that came out last year. I still think he's better than BTR, and I'll hold that. Having said that, I'm a little concerned about some of the weapons that they added in this draft. I'm not overly concerned about it, except for the fact that Luther Burden could be the guy who winds up getting utilized a lot in the slot. That could wind up hurting DJ more than it winds up hurting Romadunze. But I do think Romadunze, to me, is the hold, a guy that I think the talent should be, matched by the production on the field this year. A guy that I think the guy kind of miscast last year, is asked to just basically run goes. We saw Marvin Harrison be asked to do that as well. Except the problem for this guy was he was third in the food chain running goes, so he really had nothing to kind of feed him last year. You did see some good games. You saw some production when they actually were able to connect with Caleb. I'm hoping that Caleb, like you said, with better coaching, having somebody actually watch tape with them, actually have an actual plan of how to utilize these offensive receivers and not ask them to do things that don't make any sense. I think if Rome just gets a couple more, routes in the route tree, he doesn't just get used to Jameson Williams, which hopefully he won't, then I think there's a really good boom opportunity for him. I just have him slightly lower than the other guys we're going to talk, or one of the other guys we're going to talk about. So for me, he's that hold to buy.
Yeah, so we're fairly aligned, but Chase, take us home. What do you think of Romadunze?
Yeah, I have him as a hold right now too. I loved Romadunze. He was my second favorite receiver in that class coming out last season, and I wasn't crazy about where he went going to Chicago because of the Keenan Allen signing that they had last offseason. But Keenan Allen's moved on down the road, and that's 121 targets that have opened up. And you've already got Romadunze, who saw 101 targets last season. So if he can absorb even some of that workload from Keenan Allen and maintain what he had, I think the sky is the limit for him. I really do. I think he belongs on the outside as that true outside receiver. So I don't see Burden cutting into his production necessarily. And it's a guy that I'm excited about pairing with Burden for Caleb Williams in the long term. The weapons they've surrounded Caleb Williams with, and with Ben Johnson as the offensive mind, he's the head coach, but he's the coordinator. But if they've surrounded him like that, I think a rising tide can float all boats in this system. And I like what Odunze can bring to the table. So yeah, I have him as a hold. He's middle in this pack for me, but he's definitely a guy that I would like to acquire. He's only 22 years old, the big guy. He got to learn behind one of the best in Keenan Allen, and now I think that he really steps into his own and shines this year.
So for all of us, he's the middle guy. Very fun. I'm curious if we'll have these other two flipped. We're gonna move on to the next player, and that is Zay Flowers, a guy who I have definitely also been known to like. Baltimore Ravens wide receiver, going into his third season, had his first 1,000-yard season in his second, which was this past season, had over 100 targets, is again the wide receiver 21, ranked 66th overall. And this is an offense that, I mean, candidly, not much is really changing. He's going to continue to be the top target more than likely. It's going to continue to be a running team with Derrick Henry getting an extension this offseason. And he still gets Lamar. There's not a whole lot of change going on, but he does get 1 year older. And you wonder, how he can potentially develop in this offseason. So for me, at cost at least, he is my number one. But I mean, Chase, we'll kick it right back to you. I'm curious your thoughts.
No, I've actually got him as my sell. And I do like Zay Flowers. I have Zay Flowers on multiple rosters among my dynasty teams there. He is the oldest of these three, but 24 is not old for a receiver. He still has plenty of years yet. He's not even in his prime yet in terms of that. And I like what Zay Flowers brings to the table, but I think that last season, I mean, he was good both years. He's been good both years of his career. But last season, I think you saw pretty much what he can be. And what he can be topped out at wide receiver 24 in the league, which is not bad. That's a low end wide receiver too, but I think that's his ceiling. I think that's about what he's going to be in his life there. So I'm actually willing to sell Zay Flowers and try and get people excited about the fact that he did have that good year last year. The fact that he is the top target and the presumed top target in that offense now. That an offense that can and will throw the ball more than I think gave them credit for in the past. So yeah, I like Zay Flowers. I'm sure he's a good dude. His mother loves him, but he's a sell for me. He's third among this group for me because I think we saw what he can be last year, and that's all he can be. I don't necessarily think Zay Flowers has another level past that. So Flowers, he's my sell here.
All right. Chris, what do you got? And then we can have a little bit of conversation between the ones and threes here.
Yeah, he's going to also be my sell as well. I like Flowers a lot, and one of the things that's hard for me is, Chase, I do think he has more upside. I just don't think the upside is available to him in this offense. He's not allowed to run routes down the field, Adam, and that's where I really struggle with Zay Flowers. Like, look, the targets are in there, but down the field targets, the big plays, really haven't been consistent. You're not getting consistent passing usage either. Yes, the Ravens will throw the ball, but they're going to throw it to a lot of guys, and he's the go-to guy among where on the field. If it's 3rd and 3, it could be the running backs. If it's in the red zone, it might be going to the tight ends. It could be going to Rashad Bateman down the field. So there's a lot of other guys who get targeted in this offense that concern me, with Flowers kind of, as Chase alluded to, kind of maxing what potential was in a lot of ways out last year in this offense. And what I got was a manly, inconsistent guy where you got some boom weeks, but you got a lot of low floor weeks, and you got a lot of in-between weeks where he just kind of sat there and got maybe 2 or 3 targets, and because the Ravens just ran over somebody and they didn't need to use them. So I do have the concerns in general with his usage, and is a guy that I do like, but if I'm going to, as Chase talked about, I can get somebody to get excited about him, I would try to sell Flowers of this group.
So for me, why I have him as the one, first of all, his targets are relatively evenly distributed across the field. Behind the line of scrimmage is about 25%, short, less than 10 yards, around 30%, mediums like 35%, deep is like 20%, and that's 20 plus yards. I mean, it varies pretty evenly. He can do a little bit of everything. You did see his average depth of target go up about 2 yards from rookie season to this past season. So should they use him deep more? I would agree. But they did use him more than his rookie season. They at least got a little bit better. I think that they made a conscious effort to get him the ball. Not that they couldn't do more. And I do think that they should. But for me, this brings us into the Xavier Worthy conversation a little bit, so we can flash him on the screen here. For me, he's the clear alpha dog. And for me, when Rashee Rice comes back, which looks like he not serving a suspension, looks like he'll be healthy, I think that's the alpha dog in this offense. And as a matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if by the midseason he steals his power slot role back. And then he's the one operating out of the slot. And then what's it, Xavier Worthy? Like, to me, that would be my concern, is that I admit my biases coming out. He was a slot-only guy to me, Xavier Worthy. I don't think he's ever going to have the field strength to play on the outside in any meaningful capacity. I know he did a little bit, but it's a lot of movement. And are you going to move your power slot? Are you going to move him? I think it's going to be difficult for them to quite figure that out, especially with some of these other guys coming in, whether that's Hollywood Brown, whether that's if you are able to tap into Brashard Smith and use him as a little bit of a chess piece out of the backfield. You were going to want him to move. You can only move so many guys on the field at the same time. You can only motion so many players. So to me, that's going to be my concern with Xavier Worthy. He's someone who I think needs to be consciously used, versus, to me, Xavier Worthy is a receiver who, by the way, we're going to talk size here, right, for both these guys. Zay Flowers is small. Fully understand that. We're talking levels. He is 2 inches shorter. It's 10 pounds heavier for Zay Flowers versus Xavier Worthy. So there's levels here. Xavier Worthy is a bit of an anomaly versus Xavier Worthy is small. So for me, Worthy's the one, but I am on the losing end, or the wrong end of that conversation. So you've heard my spiel more or less on Xavier Worthy. Chase, I mean, we'll kick it back to you. You have Xavier Worthy number 1. Why do you have him there?
Yeah, I do have him as a buy. I have him as a buy. You talked about the fact that, okay, he's an anomaly size-wise. Yes, he's an anomaly size-wise. He's an anomaly speed-wise as well. You can't teach the kind of speed that man has. The same way you couldn't teach the speed that Tyreek Hill has. I like Xavier Worthy in this offense. I think that even when Rashee Rice comes back, I think there's a place for both of them to complement each other. Now, it might mean, like you said, they have to do some different things with how they use both of them. But I think that there's room for both of them on the field at the same time. And if you look at the way that they used him at the end of the year, the way that they targeted him at the end of the year, that last month or so there, 11 targets, 9 targets. And then you look at what he did. He was quiet in the divisional round, in the playoffs. But look at what he did for them then in the conference championship game. And then I know they were throwing the ball all over the place in the Super Bowl and had to, desperation time. But in desperation time, and when they needed it, he was there. He showed up for them, and he got the job done there. I like Xavier Worthy that way. I wasn't as big on him as I was on a lot of other receivers coming out. I do like Rashee Rice better in fantasy and long-term, provided he comes back strong from this injury here. But, Worthy, I think you can't teach the speed that he has, and I think that they have figured out. I think they saw something late last year. I think they are going to want to use that to their advantage. He's only 22 years old. I'm going and getting him.
Chris, feel the same way?
I'm in the same boat. Look, Adam, I hear you that you have concerns about the different guys getting involved in this offense, but as Chase alluded to, Xavier Worthy was the only dog that showed up in that Super Bowl, and I think it's going to stand out. And what it reminds me of, the guy you talked about, him being on the outside, this is Deshaun Jackson to me. We've seen this. I keep using that comp since he came out. I'm going to keep using that comp because with Andy Reid, we saw Deshaun Jackson be utilized just fine with Andy Reid and be able to get down the field and be able to excel down the field. What I think Xavier Worthy brings to the table is, can we see Patrick Mahomes pushed about down the field? That's kind of like a sort of the Flowers thing as well. It's not so much the coaching completely. It's more, can the quarterbacks actually push the ball in the field, and will they hit it when they do? With Xavier Worthy, though, there's so many ways to get the ball in his hands. And you're much more confident in Rice than I am. A, coming back healthy. B, coming back from suspension as well, and being that alpha right off the bat. But what I also have a lot of faith in, Adam, is he can be that power slot. I agree with you, because Travis Kelce's day of being that power slot is over. He can be that guy now. You're still going to need that outside receiver, and I think you're going to see the Chiefs shifting towards more pass-happy offense because they have the receivers. They did improve their offensive line, and if Simmons is what I think he's going to be, this is going to be hell to pay for a lot of teams on the outside. Xavier Worthy, to me, is an absolute buy. Whether he's inside the side, outside, I want this guy Patrick Mahomes as long as I can have him in my Dynasty lineups.
Yeah, I think it just boils down to your willingness to believe in his development on the outside. Because for me, 72% of his receiving was within 9 yards of the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, last year the Chiefs didn't throw the ball down the field at all.
Right.
And he still was good. That's kind of my point. I'm like, you didn't utilize him what he's good at, and he still was able to be productive.
Right.
Yeah, and that was always how Tyreek Hill, in my opinion, was used best too. When Tyreek Hill was popping long catches for them a couple of years ago, it wasn't 90-yard bombs that they were throwing over the top every single time. It was hitting him underneath and letting him use that speed and just outrun everyone with the ball in his hands too. I think there's an opportunity for them to recapture at least some of that with Xavier Worthy on the roster. So
the problem to me is that you see that exact same usage profile with Rashee Rice. And that with the two of them on the field, and it was with the first games of Xavier Worthy's career, so massive asterisk. Not pretending it's a clear sign of things to come, but when the two of them were on the field, it was Rashee Rice. That was the guy. So that would be my concern personally. Again, these guys are all ranked super tight. I'm not telling you to sell Xavier Worthy, go out and panic. Just for me, he's the third of this group. Moving on to the tight end position, however. So the first time we've gotten to talk about the tight end position in this group, or in this series rather, we're going to start off with everyone's favorite player leading into last season, but someone who was a massive disappointment, has retained a lot of his dynasty value despite last season's disappointment. And that, my friends, is going to be Sam LaPorta, who is still in Dynasty the tight end 3 at a position that a lot of the talent has aged, right? Bowers is by far the tight end 1. And then after that, it's people trying to guess at what else there is. And Sam LaPorta has kind of left himself as the 3 based on his rookie season, where he really popped off. The tight end position is a tough one for me. I think LaPorta, who lost Ben Johnson, we talked about it with Odunze earlier, and lost some other key pieces on offense. They did add Tesla, who I think is interesting because I view him as an equivalent to a Amon-Ra St. Brown in a lot of ways. That was actually like a not necessarily a 1-for-1 comp that I had in the offseason, but someone who I think the role meshed really well. And LaPorta has kind of operated as that other guy in a similar role. So I'm curious how this thing all works out, again, with Ben Johnson going. But Dan Campbell is also, I think, a really big driving force for this offense. So I think there's a lot of people writing off the Lions early that I don't necessarily disagree with, but at the same time, LaPorta's price tag for me is a bit rich, and for me, out of this group, I think he's more of a hold, but for me, out of this group, I have him as the 2, and I think it's really close for that 2 and 3 spot. So, Chris, what are your thoughts with Sam LaPorta?
Yeah, I also have him as my hold, Adam. As a guy that I agree, he's not tight end 3 in my board, so I'm not necessarily as high as consensus is on Sam LaPorta. I do have concerns as you do. My Tesla thing is more, I think he's more Tim Patrick's replacement. I think that's what you see him as, that big slot, that big guy who can also be a blocker. So I do think there's opportunity still for him to kind of be utilized. But my problem is what you see LaPorta usage last year, I think is what you're going to see his ceiling be moving forward, because you're going to see Jameson Williams, as long as he's on his roster, be involved. You can see some of the third receiver wind up being a Patrick, whether it winds up being Tesla or who else winds up being in that offense, is kind of being somebody that could be week to week being involved. The running backs are still going to eat. So it's going to be something that you kind of see. Now, the Morton thing, I'm not as concerned about. Morton was on this roster, on this coaching staff in 2022. He's very familiar with all this staff. He was really familiar when they first got Jared Goff and how they were signing and putting plays around him. Hockenson was kind of playing that role at the time for this team. So the tight end is always going to be involved in the offense. So you do, like Sam LaPorta, is, having some kind of floor. But the ceiling is where I think there's a possibility that you could definitely argue with me to want to sell him if you could buy him at the right price, or sell him at the right price, I should say.
Yeah, so we're fairly aligned. Chase, what are your thoughts on Sam LaPorta?
Yeah,
being in the NFC North yourself.
I'm going the opposite direction. I'm buying Sam LaPorta. I actually have him. I like him the best of all three of these guys for Dynasty. He's only 24. That's not old for a tight end. It's younger than a lot of guys coming into the league in some cases. Yeah, that first year was phenomenal. That first year that he had, everybody was psyched up, and we all thought, oh, he's going to, but we're going to see touchdown regression. We're going to see touchdown regression year 2. He didn't see touchdown regression. He saw target regression. His individual targets actually this past season, for a disappointing season, his individual targets were actually more valuable this past season than they had been his first year. He had 7 touchdowns among 83 targets, 60 receptions last year. He had 120 targets his rookie season in this league. So he saw almost 40 fewer targets and only missed his touchdown mark by 3 there. His yards per target went up over almost 1.5 yards. His yards per reception went up almost 2 yards. So his individual touches last season were actually more valuable than they had been the year before. The talent is still there. He just didn't see that crazy 120 targets. And honestly, with all the other weapons in that offense, he probably shouldn't necessarily have to see 120 targets. Now that Jamison Williams is, healthy and playing and off of, suspensions and everything else, I think the truth is probably somewhere between his first season and last season. For all the disappointment that everybody probably felt because they drafted him high and, we're expecting him to be his rookie season again, he still was tight end 7. Tight end 7 is not bad. If that's a disappointing season for a guy, that's a guy that you want to go out and get. I think he still has a great skill set to offer this offense. I think that people are going to be down on him after last season. I realize that he's still ranked as the Dynasty tight end 3, but people were disappointed last season. I think you probably could talk some people into the idea that, hey, he should be available for a little cheaper than what you maybe would have given for him the year before. And for that reason, he is a buy for me all the way. I think that he's a phenomenal player, and I think he's a complete player, and I really like what he brings to the table for not just my on-field team, but my fantasy team as well.
Yeah, definitely respect it. Chris? Oh, sorry, you talked about Sam LaPorta. On to our next guy who, spoilers, is my number 1 guy, and that's TJ Hockenson for the Minnesota Vikings. He's the oldest of this group by a decent margin, and I think it's going to come down to your values and your strategies around Dynasty. To me, even a rebuild, I'm still hoping that I'm no more than 3 years out. So for me, he's 27 now. He turns 28 before the season. So for me, even with JJ McCarthy at quarterback, even coming off the knee injury, I still think that he is the talent at the tight end position. I think he's the best tight end under 30. That isn't Brock Bowers, obviously. We're kind of brushing over him because if you don't have him already, pay up, buddy, because he's expensive. You're not buying Brock Bowers at this point. So outside of Brock Bowers, I think he's the best tight end under 30. And with that in mind, he's still going to be my buy, who is a little bit cheaper than LaPorta. Actually, the cheapest of this group at the tight end 6, ranked 77th overall. He's played with some bad quarterbacks before, and he still put up numbers. He came back after the knee injury last season. He had 9 targets in his second game back. He was on pace, had he played the full season last season, for over 100 targets coming off of the knee injury. Didn't get a touchdown in the regular season, got one in the playoff game. He's someone who I just think has been very, very steady. I think that I can plug him in for each of the next 3 seasons and feel just good and not need to worry about my starting tight end spot. And I've had the ups and downs personally with LaPorta because I have LaPorta in quite a few leagues, and I can definitely feel that coming with Warren, who we'll talk about in a minute. So that's my take on TJ Hockenson. But Chris, how do you feel about TJ Hockenson? I know he hasn't been your favorite player of all time.
No, TJ Hockenson has been my favorite player of all time, and TJ Hockenson is my sell amongst this group. Look, Adam, if I'm rebuilding, I'm getting rid of the old guy at 28 years old at tight end. I think we've gotten the best we're going to get at TJ Hockenson. This is the guy is at least third in the food chain in the receiving when everybody's healthy. Addison, Jefferson definitely getting more targets. We talked about before how I think McCarthy is not going to have as much volume in the passing game. I think that's also going to affect people like TJ Hockenson. I think there's going to be value there. I think TJ Hockenson is still going to be good. But he's a guy that I'm going to try to capitalize and I'm going to try to flip because I think there's good, decent tight ends. They're younger. And you talk about under 30. I think there's a handful of guys that I would like to target under 30 over TJ Hockenson. So for me, I'm going to try to flip him, try to sell him, and try to capitalize on somebody like yourself who's interested in trying to get some other picks or some other younger guys to work with. I don't like his, like I said, his outlook moving forward. This is the guy that I think could be an important part of the offense. But I think there's going to be a lot of different mouths to kind of be fed. And while the targets were there, Adam talked about he got his first touchdown in the playoffs. I don't know what TJ Hockenson is going to be from year to year right now. He is getting a little older. If he gets hurt again, what happens at 29? He's got a higher salary cap. He can easily be off the books. You can a Dallas Goedert situation in a year or two. So this is a guy that I want to sell and get ahead of the game with.
That's very fair. I think it's risky to hold guys at his age, but again, for me, I think he's the premier player. So Chase, what's your thoughts?
I'm kind of splitting the difference between you two of you. He's a hold for me. I agree with you that even though he's 27, he still has room left. He still has something left in the tank. He's had some injury issues in that the last 2 seasons here, but look at what he did on a per game basis in 2023. This is a rough year for him last year, 2024 there, but it was rough because of the injuries. 2023, he still scored at a phenomenal rate there especially for a tight end, 11.4 half PPR points per game there. And that was with only 5 touchdowns on the season. He saw back-to-back seasons of over 120 targets with this team. This is a guy that they want to throw the ball to, even with Jordan Addison, even with Justin Jefferson on the team, even with the guys that they've added, even with, the running game that they want to have. This is a guy that they want to get the ball to, and they should be wanting to get the ball to him because he's been good in his career that way. I'm not worried about him being 27. Like you said, it's a rebuild, but tight end is also a position that carries a little bit more longevity than you might otherwise think. And for what he can give you, I'm holding him all day long. I like TJ Hockenson, so I've got him number 2 on this list.
Okay, so we are all across the board with TJ Hockenson. That's a fun one. We have one tight end left, one player left, and that is going to be our good friend Tyler Warren. Again, continuing my streak this offseason of not being a homer. You're welcome, everyone. Tyler Warren drafted the Indianapolis Colts, Penn State tight end, rookie. So you want young, you got him. Sam LaPorta is going into year 3. Hockenson, as we talked about, we have some age concerns. Warren's young. He's coming out, and he wasn't exactly spending a ton of time at Penn State either. Someone who I think for all of us was either tight end 1 or 2 coming into this year's class. Someone we all like, and someone who, for what it's worth, I've gotten him at pretty good value, I like to think, in some rookie drafts. So as far as that goes, I do think he can be a good value. But as soon as he gets drafted, it seems like the value goes up for him a little bit once people go, oh, crap, wait, that tight end position is hard to fill. So I'm curious what you guys have to think about Tyler Warren. Chase, we'll kick it right back to you.
Yeah, I'll jump on this right away because Tyler Warren's a sell for me right now. And I hate saying that because he's a rookie and because, like you said, I have seen that, you can get him, I think, at a pretty nice value, pretty nice cost right now in your dynasty drafts. But I'm not sold or selling him. I'm not sold on his quarterback situation. I'm not sold on his quarterback situation this season, and I'm not sold on it going forward as well. This is a team that doesn't seem to have a ton of direction to me right now. I think that this is a coaching staff that needs to win now, but I think it's a coaching staff that also kind of felt some pressure to try to justify taking Anthony Richardson as high as they did and trying to shoehorn him into a starting role before he was ready to do it. Listen, I realize that Daniel Jones is not the thrower of the football that Anthony Richardson is, but he is a much better passer of the football. This is the difference to me, and there's a difference between a guy that can just throw the football through the wall and a guy who can actually complete passes in the NFL. And Anthony Richardson, to me, has not shown the ability to be a guy that can complete passes at the NFL level, at the quarterback position. That is job one, in my opinion. So I'm not sold on his quarterback situation this season. If it's not one of these two guys, for the future, where does that leave Tyler Warren in year 2, in year 3, when we are hoping to be getting back into our contention window? On top of that, then, I'm not sold that it's going to be the same coaching staff. Is he going to have to learn 2 new offenses here in the next year or two? I hate the situation for him. I'm sorry, because I know that rangs on your team a little bit, but I don't like his situation, so I'm selling him and his situation.
Well, by the way, I forgot to actually say this, but he is my sell in my third, so just so we're clear there. But Chris, you can kind of take us home here with your thoughts on Tyler Warren, since I know you're a little bit different.
Yeah, I replaced Adam as the Colts defender on this show because I feel like nobody else will defend the Colts any longer. Look, I was the one leading the charge against Anthony Richardson and not liking his attack accuracy, but one of the questions I kept bringing up was did he work at it? If he worked at it, I had some faith that it could be improved. Same thing with Daniel Jones. I think Daniel Jones still stinks as a quarterback, but I think there's some tangibility that he could throw the ball to the tight end. We've seen that do it in the past, and B, that he can make this function in his offense. So I'm not really worried about the concerns about the quarterback play. I think Shane Steichen is my key. If Shane Steichen coaches, then I have no concerns about who the quarterback is, and Tyler Warren will be definitely utilized. We've seen Shane Steichen utilize tight end quite well in previous stops. He was able to do so with the Colts. He was able to do so with the Eagles. This last couple of years for the Colts, it hasn't necessarily been a position they've featured as much. But what I like for him, whether it's Richardson or Daniel Jones, is this is going to probably be their number one red zone guy if it's not Pittman. They don't have a lot of other guys who are kind of targets to utilize red zone. I know Donnie Mitchell is a guy people are excited about, but we'll see how that kind of materializes. Him and Pierce are guys more that go down the field. So I think you have guys who can kind of spread the field for Warren to get those easy targets. I wasn't as big on Warren as being as athletic as we thought he was coming out of the draft. So my knock on him, in a sense, is that he shouldn't have gone as high as 8. But where he went, I think, is perfect. He's TJ Hockenson to me, and I have a younger version of him on the Colts at 22 years old. He's the buy of the group for me.
Yeah, I get it. For me, the situation's tough, but I definitely I understand, and I have a little bit of faith in Richardson, or that maybe that worst case he stinks enough and they can get someone else. But
I also like. Go ahead, Adam. I was going to say real quick, I like the running back situation too. If you're running attack and a quarterback who likes to hold the ball, you usually see those tight ends get cheap touchdowns as well. So I think there's opportunity for Warren to get some points and get that 5 touchdowns you saw TJ Hockenson had the last 2 years that you guys are buying.
Yeah, well, and he's got the wingspan to reel it in if Richardson is still dealing with some of the accuracy issues. But that's going to wrap it up for us. Definitely make sure to check out the Fantasy Sports Advice Network, and definitely make sure to check us out next week. We're going to be talking about just generally our watch list for storylines that we want to keep an eye on going into training camp, going into next season. What are the things we're keeping an eye on, especially, of course, from this Dynasty lens that we've been doing for the month of May before we kick it off into more best ball redraft, some of these other things. So, again, thanks so much for watching. Cheers.